Good morning. My name is Rev Kylie Renner, and on behalf of the entire One Spiritual Center community, I want to welcome you here on this incredibly beautiful morning. Thank you for bringing your love into this space today. Thank you for joining me here in my front yard. It's still so strange, but it works, right? So here we are. I've shared before that I have kind of this really interesting life where basically everything I do gets reviewed. So I do church and people leave reviews. I have Airbnbs and people leave reviews. My husband and I have a furniture business and people leave reviews. And I teach school. I teach English to Chinese students. And the parents leave reviews. And so sometimes things kind of get lost in translation. And so a few months ago, I had a review from a parent that I really didn't understand well. And it said, "Teacher is fried chicken." So it was, these literal translations sometimes. And I figure, I have a student who's a little older who gets this big smile on her face every time I see her, and because I say, "What did you do today?" And she always tells me, "I ate Kentucky Fried Chicken." And apparently I had this theory that they must assume that all Americans really, really love fried chicken, and so teacher is fried chicken was some sort of compliment, I figured. So a few days ago, we actually, the company I work for sent out a newsletter that it was to explain some of these idioms to help out, because in literal translation, fried chicken was confusing people and things like that. And so there was 3 that were explained, and I'm going to give them to you because I've been laughing about this all week. So the first one, fried chicken, means super. So you are super. If you're fried chicken, you're like super awesome. You are great. So then the next one that I thought was funny was canola flour, which is also means like excellent. Like somehow that means excellent. But this is my favorite because I feel like the country and we deserve it right now. So this one is crooked nuts. And this is the translation for foreigner. And I don't know, I feel a little bit like crooked nuts right now in this country. So here in this household, we've been having a lot of fun with these new idioms, because sometimes the things that get lost in translation end up bringing joy. And so I just am in a space this morning of appreciating the fact that we there's so much beauty in this world, so many different ways to say things, so many ways to communicate, so many things to experience, so many crooked nuts. I can't get over it. So I'm just so grateful that we get to be together this morning, that we get to open our hearts and make some room for whatever it is that's trying to find us. And so thank you for taking the time to bring yourself present here today with us. And we're going to start with some prayers. So if you're comfortable just breathing into this morning, after that sweet rain last night that has cleared the air from some of that smoke that we've been experiencing, just allowing ourselves to breathe a little deeper today. I know the power in the presence of the one present here is all of that which is going on inside of us and around us. The one fully present, as well as finding its way into new expression. And I just know that Spirit knows what it is doing as us. It knows how to open and how to guide us in whatever the next right moment, the next right step, whatever that is. And so I allow this time that we've given ourselves to be a time in which we are available to whatever it is that we need to be available to. I invite it so that we may be clear, so that we may know how loved we are, and so that we may remember why we are here. And so we just lean into this and we let it be. And so it is. Whoa, here we go. that was that was great. I'm like, where did that come from? So today I've chosen a poem that I go back to over and over again to prepare the way for our meditation. And every time I read it, I feel like I understand it in some deeper way. So here it is. It's called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from the beyond. And so we just allow this message and the meditation to move us today.
Thank you.
It is a beautiful morning, isn't it? Thank you, guys. So I think for many of us, this interesting time we're living in, these particular circumstances that are happening around us and in us are causing a lot of reevaluation to happen. And there's a lot of questions that are coming up about what is it that we're, what is in our lives, and or what is now not in our lives, and what do we value, and how does this all work? And these questions have been coming up really strongly for me, especially around the what we create space for. And so some of you know or don't know something about me, which is that I am one of these people who is constantly in this space of recognizing the space I'm in and trying to figure out how to benefit from it, or how to use it, or how it works. And it's kind of this relationship I have to spaces and things. And as I've gotten clearer about that, I realize that there's a lot of ways in which that makes me different in how I deal with things than other people. Because I know that there's a lot of people who move into new spaces and put their things in one place and they never move. It's just there. And that's not how my life works. Things are constantly moving, changing. Walls are coming down. Plans are changing. Things are shifting, and it's really interesting to watch how uncomfortable that makes certain people, and how even on some level, even though I'm actually really good at that, at some point it starts to drive me crazy. So we've been in this home for 3 years. We are still not done renovating it, because what we do is we first make spaces that are good for everyone else. And so we starting in March, realized that if we were going to be spending a lot more time here were no vacations, there were no traveling or things like that happening, then we were going to need to make sure that we were making the space better for us. And so we finally finished our kitchen, mostly, which is wonderful and exciting, especially because I don't know about you, but I cook a lot more now than I used to, and I always cooked a lot. But one of the things that started to happen was the realization that, okay, so our bed is in what's going to be our dining room, and it's just kind of like we're living in smaller and smaller areas of our house. How do we want to make this work? And so we had this brilliant idea that we were going to, now that we've built a shop, we were going to build a shed. And so we've just started building a shed, and it's glorious. It's back there in the corner. You might notice it's 12 feet tall. It's kind of hard to miss. And we were getting that, framed out. And then all of a sudden, Zephyr gets this phone call that says, I would really love for you to represent this giant collection of very, very, very valuable and beautiful and rare furniture. Would you be willing? We'd like to drop it off to you. And of course, the answer was yes. Yes, of course, this is exactly the opportunity. But all of a sudden, I thought, I was thinking that we were making space for us. Right? I was thinking, we're going to have our dining room back, and I'm going to move back into a bedroom, and what would be cool? I could actually have a closet. That would be awesome, because I haven't had a closet in 3 years. Yeah, it would be awesome. And all of those things. And you know what? Spirit wasn't working with the same idea that I was. And one of the things that I'm so aware of in this is this idea of what is it I'm making room for? What is it I'm really making room for? Am I making room for a bedroom, or am I making room for God to do some work in my life? Like, am I making room for what I think my agenda is, or what I think my plans are, or am I actually making room for something bigger? And I think that this is a really important question, because I think that oftentimes when we are making changes in our lives, which we all are right now, we're doing them from the perspective of, this is how I think if I were in charge, if I were in control, that these are the ways in which I would like that to happen. And I have to tell you that I do not believe that is how Spirit really operates, or how it's wanting to operate in our lives right now. Like, we need some more creative energy in our world right now, some creative energy to be unleashed so that we can create something different in the future. And so if we're willing then to be a space instead of just creating space for what we think is going to happen, or what our expectations are, or what our ideas or our limitations are, like, it's time to really create some space for Spirit to do things in our world that maybe we weren't expecting, that actually lead to some deep healing, instead of just making room for more of the same. And so there's this great old story that I think there's a version of it in every tradition, because it's just so appropriate. And there's this story that this particular version comes from Poland. And the story is about a family that lived in a small and quiet house. And one day they learned that the grandparents of the family were going to come live with them. And their children were really excited, and so were the parents, but the parents worried that the house was going to be too small for everyone. And so they knew that when the grandparents arrived, that it was going to be much, much more crowded and much noisier. And so the farmer, whose family this was, went to ask the rabbi what to do. And the rabbi said, well, let them come. And so the grandparents move in, and they have a lot of furniture, which goes in the living room where they sleep, and in some other rooms too, and it's crowded and noisy. And so the farmer goes back to the rabbi and says, I did what you said, Rabbi. Now my in-laws are here, and it's really, really crowded. And so the rabbi thinks for a moment, and he says, well, do you have any chickens? Well, I'm a farmer. Of course I have chickens, he says. And so the rabbi says, well, bring them into the house. So the farmer's confused, but he knows that the rabbi is very, very wise. And so he goes home and brings all of the chickens to live inside the house with the family. But it is no less crowded and noisy. In fact, it's worse because now there's clucking and pecking and flapping of wings, and I'm only imagining chicken shit. So, So the farmer goes back to the rabbi and says, "I did what you said, Rabbi. Now I live with my in-laws and chickens too. It is very, very crowded and even more noisy." And so the rabbi thinks for a moment and says, "Well, do you have any goats?" And says, of course I have goats. Well, bring them into the house too. And so now the farmer is very confused, but he knows that the rabbi is very wise. And so he brings the goats from the barn to live inside the house. And it is no less crowded or noisy. In fact, it is very, very much worse, with the chickens clucking and flapping their wings and the goats baaing and butting their heads against the wall and eating everything in sight. And so the next day, the farmer goes to the rabbi and says, "I did what you said, Rabbi. Now I live with my in-laws who have no place to sleep because the chickens have taken their bed and the goats are sticking their heads in everything and making a lot of noise." And the rabbi looks very puzzled and he says, "Well, you must have some sheep." "Oh, of course I have sheep. So bring them into the house," he says. And the farmer knows that the rabbi is very wise. And so he brings the sheep inside, and it's no less crowded or noisy. In fact, it is much, much worse. The chickens are clucking and flapping their wings. The goats are butting heads and eating everything in sight. The sheep are baaing too. And one sat on the farmer's eyeglasses and broke them. And the house is so loud and crazy, and it is really now starting to smell like a barn. And so, completely exasperated, the farmer goes back to the rabbi and says, "Rabbi, I really trust you as a wise one, and I have followed your advice. I have done everything you said, and now I live with my in-laws and goats and chickens and sheep, and the goats are baaing and butting their heads, and the sheep are breaking things, and the chickens are laying eggs in my in-laws' bed, and it's really, really, really not quiet in my home. In fact, it smells like a barn." And so the rabbi frowned and he closed his eyes and thought for a long time, and he says, "Fine, this is what you do. Take the sheep back to the barn. Take the goats back to the barn. Take the chickens back to their coop." And the farmer ran home and did exactly what the rabbi told him. And as he took the animals out of the house, his child and wife and in-laws began to tidy up their rooms. And by the time the last chicken was settled into her coop, the house looked quite nice. And it was quiet. And all the family agreed that their home was the most spacious, peaceful, and comfortable home anywhere. And so I love that story from the perspective of all of the things in our lives, right? Like the things that we have made room for that are making it seem partially by our own choice that our life doesn't look the way we think it should. And what our relationship to that is. Are these things that we've given space to things that we've chosen to participate in, that in fact we could open ourselves to allowing this deeper vision of what's happening, allow us to move into a space where we start to appreciate that which is here and then the absence of those things as well. And our power to choose what it is that we're making space for. And honestly, if I was being real about what I'm making space for right now, especially on an internal level, I'm realizing that especially over the last few months, as I've gotten angstier and angstier about what's happening with all of the things that are going on in our country, like that I have some space in my life that I've allowed to have room for a lot of bullshit. Like there is room there that I have allowed for. And this idea of opening to a bigger vision is requiring me to realize that I need to stop making room for that. Like that is not acceptable. There are things going on in our country that are not acceptable. And I need to make sure that I do not have room for them. And this is one of those spiritual things that I think that on some sort of level, I think we get more deeply than we realize, which is that really, if we have space for it, it will get filled with it. That if we have space for that which is unacceptable, it will get filled with that which is unacceptable. If we have space for that which we know is possible, this different idea that things will fill with that. We understand that because we live our lives in that way all of the time. Our houses are filled with the things that we have found acceptable, right? So this is this sense in which, how do we make sure that we're tidying up right now? So how do we make sure that we're making room for that which we really want to be participating in, and that which we want to be creating, and how do we put it to work? So there's this great Swahili proverb that I love, which is that you should treat your guests as guests for 2 days, but then on the third day you give them a hoe. Right? You put them to work. You put the things in your world to work. And I think so often we do not do that. Instead, what we do is we allow things to occupy space until somehow we're forced into some decision around things that isn't really about vision. It really isn't about creativity. It really isn't about making space for what's possible. It's just about carrying on that which has been. And we do this over and over, and I'm not saying that some of that is not necessary, because there's certain things that need to happen over and over again, right? We need to wake up and brush our teeth every day. Like some of those things do need to happen over and over again. But there's this other sense in which we're being asked to do something different, something deeper, something more powerful with this time we're living in, that is about, how do I want to make sure that I'm making space for that which is really calling me, and not holding space for all kinds of things that just don't belong there anymore. And how do I want to make sure that I'm making those things most hospitable in my life? And so sometimes I feel like I forget why I'm doing all of this, right? Like I forget, and it just feels overwhelming, and it just feels like it I don't know, like why, right? And then I get reminders. And so yesterday I was just I turned around and saw something flicker on a screen, and I was like, what is that? And I stopped and I listened to this man read one of his poems, and I don't know that I caught all of it, and I wasn't able to go replay it. But one of the lines that struck me, which was such a great reminder, was this man said, "I know that heaven is full of music, and that God is listening to my heartbeat on his iPod." And there was just this that zing, that reminder that really our heartbeat, like the reason we're here, is like music to the divine, like really like this deep sense of like, that's why we're here. Like that's the truth, right? Like not all of that other stuff we've made room for, not all of those lies we've told about ourselves, not all of the ways we've forgotten the truth of who we are or what we're up to. Like that's not really it. And I get swept up into it just like everyone else. And then I have those moments where I'm like, I needed that. I needed to remember that God is listening to my heartbeat on her iPod, right? I need to remember that. I need to remember that that's why I've been sent here. Like to make room for that remembering, not all the other stuff. And when I make room for that, everything else makes sense. Everything else starts to move and change. Everything else takes care of itself, and I don't have to worry, and I don't have to doubt. So the other zing yesterday came with me in the of being angsty about my plans changing, and the two words were trust faster. And it was like zing. That's what I needed right then. I needed the reminder that whatever was happening, it was my job to trust it faster. Because eventually I get there. Eventually I'd have been clearing me out for some new delight. right? Eventually I get to that place of remembering, but there's a call in me to trust that process faster. To trust that inside me that knows what it's doing, that all of this in motion, trust faster that the infinite me and every one of us is so much and has not abandoned us and has not sent us here without the tools and the skills and the love inside of us to do whatever it is we're called to do. Like really, like this sense, how do I am available to that, and how do I trust that faster so that I don't spin myself so far out in making room for things that I don't need to make room for. And so I just recognize that however this looks for you probably may look different than it looks for me, because not everyone has, how many chairs coming on Friday supper? 16 new chairs, a gigantic table, and a fairly large desk, all arriving. Not everyone's life looks like that, right? Not everyone's life looks like that constant, like, whoa, okay, how do I make room for that now? But you ask the question, do I really have room for this? Do I really have room spiritually for this? And to really to look at how we participate in this. So I'm really bad at this, because there's this part of me that says, if it's here and it's been being given to me, like somehow I'm supposed to use it. And I got really clear about how ridiculous this is, because I was going through my pantry just recently after having moved several times in the last few years and thinking I had gotten through everything. And I came across a bunch of things that my mother-in-law gave me at like 9 years ago, because she decided that their salt content was too high and she was going to pawn them off on some unsuspecting daughter-in-law, that I was certainly going to use them. And 9 years later, they're way past their best if used by date, and I still haven't used them, but I feel like it's been given to me, so I must use it. I must figure out a way, and I'm having to get really clear that that's not necessarily what I'm here to do either.